Hello to viewers. So I talked about making sort of session analyzing video. So this is a recording I played some time ago, and it's a bit over 2 hours in total, but I thought that I will split this into 4 parts, so it's a bit more, maybe more easy to watch. If you have any questions about certain hand, just put the timestamp of the YouTube video 10 on your comment, so it's easier to find it. But yeah, I played 25 and 50 euro 5-man SNGs, and then let's start to go through them. Auto right, standard open, and c-betting, pretty dry flop. And bottom right, we just checked behind and don't hit the flop. Can actually use 1.5 x speed probably. So top right, if the opponent like min raised or 2.5x, I would often defend, but when he goes that 3.5 BB, we can pretty happily fold that crappy hand. And bottom right, I think both limping and raising are reasonable. And usually on this sort of ace-king 3 flop, we have a lot of fallback equity in linked pot especially. Because we lane might be raising decent amount of those AX, King X pre-flop against my limp. But once he calls and we don't turn any equity, I'm just going to shut down and give up on the hand. And top right, there is some argument in c-betting, as this is still relatively dry flop for the being paired board. Of course, it's as wet as paired board can be basically, but still pretty dry overall. So I don't necessarily mind c-betting or checking, but if I check, my plan is usually to call good amount of turn bets and evaluate the river. Well, I checked the turn again, so I went for this time for small bet, and this is basically value bet and protection bet, so we don't want to see fourth spade, and we don't really mind if we get villain to fold like some 7-6, that we don't give it chance to free roll anymore, because when the villain check on the turn, I think it's going to discount a lot of like Queen X or better, and often also a lot of Jack X, so you will usually get good amount of fold equity, and getting check raised here is usually pretty rare, so I kind of like those delayed c-bets in those spots. And then some garbage, pocket nines, probably going to raise. And king 5 upper right beside it, just open fold. It's not horrible to open, especially if you have tight reads on the blinds, but default I kind of prefer folding. I'm not going through every decision, obviously, but still some of them. So limp pot upper right. I'm just going to check, as we don't have such a much of a draw here. Top left is kind of an interesting spot in a way that the small blind limps. And when you are like 20 big blind deep, you want to think about what happens if the small blind now goes for limp shove. And my plan is most likely to be here to raise call with ace-9 shooter. It's 5-handed, so the ICM is not like that big at that point. Of course, it's not like you are thrilled to call if the small blind now shoves the 20 big blind, but he might also have decently wide limp shoving range. It's actually kind of the same situation here, bottom right. So if we raise this sort of hand and will lane limp shoves 8-9 suited, it's basically a disaster because we have to fold very potent hand. So as default, if I think that the opponent is not very straightforward, I'm going to be checking this almost always. And upper right will then check again in the limp pot. We get cut shot now, so I decided to go for the cheap mini bet my bluff. And bottom right, I think we could go either way, raising or calling. Now he goes for pot size, so I would usually quite heavily discount hitting 8 or 9. And that's one of the good things about calling, is that if we hit the turn 8 or 9, there is a lot higher chance that we have the best hand compared that we raise the flop, we lane call, and then we hit 8 or 9. Because then if that happens, we probably want to check the turn or just go for the stack, like big bet and stack off, but that's not that great necessarily. But yeah, we called and he goes for pot size bet. We only have 8 not out now, which goes roughly to 18% equity, so we obviously don't get direct pot odds. And if we count about 320, so we would need to have like, would need to get decent amount. I mean, I think it's quite close if we assume that we get will lane to stack off most of the time. But I probably just fold it here because there is also some of the ICM, and which basically weakens the situation compared to pure chip EV mode. Well, big slick top left will then raise. We have 20 big blinds, so going to shove. It's not necessarily bad to have some. The alternative line is to 3-bet to something like 500, and we can still have some 3-bet folding range. For example, let's say we had maybe King Jack off, King 10 off, Queen Jack off. We might not want to be shoving in this situation, but with the blockers it could be decent. Or maybe some sort of Ace 10 off. But we could also 3-bet fold, so that's the alternative option. But obviously shoving is pretty much the standard. And bottom right, open raising the pocket 7s. Basically the idea is to call against single opponents. And bottom left I decided to fold because of the effective stacks. Most players have pretty nice shoving stacks behind me. Now it's basically only Cutoff has kind of awkward. But he can also just 3-bet small and stack off against me and fold against a big blind, for example. So bottom right, the small blind calls for small 3-bet. As default, as I said, my plan is to call if they shove. And this is also kind of a situation that I believe a small blind could have some 3-bet folding range. But he might also 3-bet smallish with all of his range because he is still what, 35 BB deep against the big blind. So even if he has hands that is willing to stack off against me, he might want to give the possibility to fold if the big blind happens to 4-bet. But yeah, I would as default assume some fold equity. We are 20 big blind deep. But if you have a read that will then it's really on the tighter side, passive side, then it is probably possible to fold also, but just went for the 4-bet shove and we end up in the flip, which we tend to fold. Top right, small blind is limping again, has been limping a lot. So I personally like to use these sort of hands to some portion of time raise against the limp. And the main idea is obviously that by using some of these non-value hands to raise, we punish the or put the small blind in tougher spots. So if we only raise like clear value hands, then he's going to see the free flop or cheap flop a lot of time, and it's also quite easy for him to just win fold quite a lot of his range. But yeah, we get really dry flops, so I just went for small c-bet and I mean, maybe if there is 5 or 4, I might try the double barrel, depending if I have any read. I mean, if the villain is going to fold like king high, for example, on the flop, then getting him off with the second barrel might be quite a bad idea. If his range is weighted toward queen x or better, basically. Bottom right, I open, also the big blind is sitting out, which could also widen the hijack range to cut-off range to shove over me. So this is, I think, mandatory call. King jack off, we could maybe fold, but I don't think suited is ever going to be fold in that spot with those spot odds. And bottom left, I defended king 9, just giving up tier. And 6-10 should be defend. Bottom right, limp spot, I check with the plan to check call. But yeah, naturally, ace comes on the turn. My plan is to still check call most of the time. I mean, maybe if villain goes like pop size or over a bet, we could just fold, but against the half pot, I think we have to call. Of course, the nasty part is if he double barrels and he goes big here also, so most likely I'm just going to be folding. Top left seems like I fold, but I think it's kind of close. You could probably argue of defending. Still having some also playability. And a couple of open limps. Top right, kind of nice hand that we have decent amount of backdoors, even though we don't have direct draw currently. And top left is fairly standard shoving spot. And the upper right, pretty standard. I mean, it's one of those spots where, well, it's awkward to get check raised, but we should, like theory-wise, we probably should almost never get raised because we have such a range advantage, because we can have any strong holding on the flop, which Will-Lane probably doesn't have like any sets or more. I mean, of course he can sometimes have like aces or something, but most of the time he won't have any set, or most of the sets, and like ace queen, maybe not ace 10. So theory wise, if I were on the Will-Lane shoes, I would pretty much never raise in this spot. I would just check call, check fold. And bottom left, easy call with the king queen, and also nice shove with 10 big blind deep with the 8-5 from the Will-Lane. So ace 3, bottom right. If I had like 15 big blind, I would probably shove. I think with this stack depth that we are closer to 20 big blind, the risk reward is starting to be a bit on the bad side. So I just try to check the showdown here, unimproved. And bottom left going to min raise. And he pots bets again. Top left would be open shove. And obviously for bet 7s we have to call or shove. Pretty nice flop with the set. The 5-6 I might sometimes go for the raise. Alright. This time though. And probably value betting turn and possibly some reverse. Oh, that's pretty great. Pretty great river also. Bottom left, once again limped pot against this guy. It's one of those quite awkward spots when Will-Lane goes for almost pot size. Because the fact is that we are not going to improve that often, and if he fires big on the turn, I mean it's really nasty to continue, so in a way I don't really mind folding either, but at the same time, I mean folding middle pair to see bet is kind of nasty as well, so see, I went for the call. The 3 is good in a way that it might shut down the Will-Lane. But he continues betting, so I just folded probably. Well, top left we have overcard and gutshot. It's not really strong enough to check raise, I think, but I probably check call. I mean, maybe leading would be also plausible, but we also have to lead tens on top pairs type of hands. And bottom right we are quite a clear middle stack, so we are quite handcuffed in that situation. At least if we assume that players are at least somewhat aggressive. And seems like bottom left I decided to fold. I mean, it might be a bit better to open raise and call against the big blind, but probably not a big difference. And this time it seems like I go for the raise with the 6-5 upper right. And again, kind of same reasoning that we have some of the bit wider range for the raise, and I mean it's also nice that if the villain call and we get low board, we actually have some connectivity with it. It seems like upper right I'm folding, but I think we should continue. We have the Queen of Diamond and also the Nine, so we can turn some straight draws. Queen High can have some showdown value, so I think we should call or maybe raise some portion of time, but I think folding with the Queen of Diamond is likely too tight. And bottom right is actually quite interesting spot, I believe. Because when the villain shove, I would think that this range is at least somewhat capped, but like I decided to call, we could actually check that one. Check that one with the hold'em resources. So if the villain is shoving 40%, we should be calling a 6 shooter plus, so a3 is too wide. But at the same time, I would discount at least some of these more premium holdings. I mean, maybe he doesn't shove all the crap either, but against something like that, we would have like float bit plus EV call, so yeah, might be reasonable, but really thin spot. And I mean, he had ace-4, I believe, which is pretty standard anyway. Get the split here. And yeah, bottom right, deuce queen is too weak, and bottom left, I folding that. And top right, middle pair, check calling. Doesn't really make sense to do anything else. And bottom left, with the 12 PP, I most likely shove the suited 9. And yeah, we got called, but we have like 45% equity against that hand. Top right is kinda interesting situation that flush draw did complete. If there wasn't flush draw completing, I think we would have pretty easy value bet overall, but with it completing, I think it might be better to check and maybe go for the call 10. And top right, we could go either way. I mean, we most of the time have the best hand here. And we want some protection. seems like I was contemplating on what I want to do here. But yeah, I think both options are reasonable. And yeah, I think we actually want to play pretty much every hand that is visible at this point. And bottom right, yeah, I went for the call. So the idea here is that I will call anyway if the big blind shove, but I don't mind if the big blind call also, because basically it will maximize the possibility that the bottom is going to drop out, and I mean the king jack suited has good post playability, so also from that perspective it's not such a disaster if the BB comes along, even if it will decrease my equity a little bit. And yeah, we'll lane calls, and 6-7 port run is basically like one of the worst ones possible. Can't really do anything else than fold here. And seems like I went again for the raise, and bottom right I probably call the king high. We don't have backdoor flush draw though, but at the same time will lane cannot be c-betting really wide. And the king high is fairly high in my range overall here. I will have a decent amount of AX, but yeah, upper right is kind of a... I think we can go for the c-bet to try and deny the equity and take the pot down right away, but at the same time it will lead into quite nasty situations. It's kind of interesting turn because obviously it will decrease the 6x somewhat, and there are good amount of like some flush draws, some straight draws we then could have. Oh yeah, I went for the check here, and queens obviously easy stack off top left. And bottom right, not sure what I will do here. I think both options probably has some merit because it's really dry flop, so I think we can actually get good amount of credit for betting. But I mean, we have some showdown value anyway. So top right, middle lane goes for the bet, so I will probably go for the check call here. And ace is basically a really good card because, I mean, if the middle lane shoves the river, I believe he's going to mainly represent the 6x, which is still combination wise not that lot of hands most likely. So when thinking that he could have busted flush draw, he could have some 7-8, 8-9, 8-7, I mean 9-7, so that type of stuff easily. Maybe some sort of queen jack or something sometimes. And yeah, it's like if he has king 10 or something, I'm not sure if he's going to shove because I might have some AX or 6x obviously. So I think even though it's just half pot, it might be actually that the lane range is quite polarized. And we lock blocks on the bottom left. And he did give up here with 8-7. So I think that hand would probably be one of the better bluff combos in a way that he doesn't block the diamonds. But I don't know. I might have heroed here. So went with the trap limp with the ace queen. And top left king 9, I think we could limp call or shove. It's both of those are fine. And bottom left I go for the fold. I think it's quite close one also. We could actually check that one also. Unnecessarily close the software on the after earlier one. But yeah, I think ace-10 I would call, and some ace-7 suited or ace-6 suited plus, but ace-9 might be okay to fold, but that's why we are checking it. So if the button shoves 30%, we would call with the ace-9 off, and also ace-8 off would be break even. So this was possibly a bit too tight play. We can also use the range versus hand here. So we take the opponent's plot, range versus hand, and small blind. It's me, so it's against my hand, bottom range versus my hand. So we take ace-9, we will see this sort of grab, where the x-axis is the range of bottom range, having range, and the y-axis is the equity, and it's 0 and here, so the lane needs to be like wider than 25%. Basically. We look about 25% here roughly. I mean 10 big blind, most likely he will shove any ace, and yeah, it's pretty likely that will end shoving at least this wide, so I think I made mistakes here by folding, and he actually had only 9 big blinds, so yeah, I should have called it here. I think but he actually had pocket 10s this time, which have been nice flop. So, and it seems like, did I shove on the bottom right? Yeah, I went for the 14 big blind shove. That's definitely fine option. And upper right, we hit the top pair, but no action. Okay, so bottom left I decided to min raise, having the blocker and shootedness. Yeah, I think it's fine. It's a bit too wide to be shoving that, I believe, so don't mind. Bottom right, really awkward to face such a shove, because I mean these are quite often weighted towards some sort of small to medium pocket pair, or some AX and some like Broadway Jack 10 type of hand, so I probably folded the ace deuce here. And yeah, queen 4 too big to be shoving, but we can try to limp it. Okay, bottom left. Yeah, so I min raised and this guy called. I decided to slow play, it seems, on the flop. It is fine, of course, in a way that Willen is quite rarely hitting here and on his flop from the small blind. And we don't really need protection. I mean, he has the a high flush draw. Money would go in anyway, so doesn't really matter. And he overshoves here, so I don't think he ever has flush or full house with this line. Okay, he had trips, makes sense. In a way, well, he shouldn't really have 5x, obviously, or he shouldn't really call pre-flop anyway, but it makes sense in a way that it's vulnerable, but strong hand. Luckily we hold here. And yeah, bottom left, pretty nice spot to shove, because small blind is forced to fold basically almost everything, because if he calls 10, basically the big blind should be folding folding quite a bit and hope that I win the all-in. And bottom right, my plan was probably to check call the flop, but now that the villain checks behind, of course the king might hit him, but I think at the same time it's still a pretty decent spot to be semi-bluffing. And top right went, did it go checked or? Well, I'm not totally sure. Considering I checked twice, it probably was limped, but and we then bet the flop. And 7-5. I mean, villain is offering pretty cheap price to call, so now we have the fast draw also. And yeah, I went for the bluffed here. Pretty small sizing, so I don't really try to fold out much of a pair type of hand, but I mean there is a lot of high card hands that also beat me. And maybe we get like some 6x or something like that to fold. And bottom right, I limp trapped. C-bet will then raise. I think we can go either way on the flop, shove or call, with having the queen of club. And it seems like I went for the shove and villain had open ender. I think again hand on the upper right that I could probably check call with the backdoor flush draw. And the upper left just going to be check on the flop. We have quite a lot of situation with 3 heads up. We'll then check again. I think we should bet here most of the time on the turn. And bottom left, I can see credit in either line. I mean, we have backdoor flush draw, overcard, open ender. But at the same time, we also have some showdown value with the queen, so I think we can do a mix of both probably. And the top left will then, I mean, the queen is kind of a crappy one. I mean, I think we still have the best hand most of the time, but getting value out of 8x or 6x is pretty tough. We don't have the best hand this time. And we'll line bet again. I mean, we still get decent price. See, I called again. I mean, we might still have the best hand some portion of time. So villain might be bluffing us off. Okay, he had actually top 2 pair. Luckily we didn't go for the check raise. Check raise this time. Oh, top left seems like I decided to stab. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but more often I would just check behind, having some showdown value, but not really. I mean, not really that many turn cards you are going to be happy about. Well, nasty setup, bottom left. And top left seems like I decided to go for raise. I think we have been pretty passive on that hitch up so far, and we get gut shot. Probably going to see it like 1/3 here. Okay, top right, I went for check call, this time having king high. And probably just checking river. And shoving bottom left. Also, if you want to give feedback, like, do you like that I use the 1.5x speed, or is it maybe better if I use the 1x normal playback speed? Any feedback is welcome. What do you think about format like this? In the first place, I also talked about making some video where I go through like certain hands that I have took images of. So we don't have tracking on the Unibet, but so it will be just focusing on certain situations. Could be some pre-flop spots, but also probably weighted toward post-flop hands that has gone into post-flop, because I mean pre-flop situations are still somewhat straightforward most of the time. And the A6-8 suited, nasty hands to fold, but just not good enough. And Ace-10 I could sometimes also limp bottom left, but don't really mind either way. Heads up is pretty nice when you get like this sort of AXs all the time. Well, not that they win all the time, but so 8-5 bottom right. I think it's pretty marginal to defend against 3x sizing, so seems like I decided to go for like 3-bet, which is I think reasonable, because most of the time you don't want to do you want to have like polarized range usually in these situations, especially if you assume that the opponent is capable of folding something. So you don't really want to be 3-betting like queen jack suited and then facing shove and having to fold it. So I think this sort of pretty marginal falling hand is fine though. And I mean, against 3x maybe it's even too wide, but all against 2.5 BB I definitely wouldn't fold anyway. But it seems like I'm going for smallish 3-bet here from the position. I mean, it's nasty situation to be out of position here if you don't have pretty nice holding, which is also why I personally use quite a bit of limping. I do some raising also. And top right should be call and bottom right 3-betting with the plan to stack off. I mean, if the bottom shoves, you're not going to be that happy about it usually, but it's still too strong hands to be folded pretty much. Oh, I actually folded. That should have been call on the top right. And well, thing is that bottom calls, I think he can have some pocket 8s, 9s type of hand. And probably 10, sometimes 10 jacks, queens, and also those kings and aces. This guy does slow play them some portion of time. At the same time, it's fairly dry flop. You can also have some jack 10 suited at least, and those other suited broadways, and of course some king x, and maybe some of those like 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited, 8-9, 8-7 suited type some portion of time. But yeah, I think this is not that bad of a c-bet candidate. I mean, we have of course showdown value, but if we start checking here and we'll lane bet, it's quite tough to continue overall. I mean, we are at 1-3 betting, so we can basically have, I could have any set here. I could have sometimes like 8-9 suited, king 9 suited. And of course those big pocket pairs, ace king, king queen, king jack. So you can also represent quite a bit of value combos. So we will then call. So yeah, seems like I'm going for second barrel here. I don't think we need to use that big of a sizing. We have a bit over SPR1 behind. So by making this like 400, maybe we could go even like a little bit smaller, but I think 400 is enough. So we can basically bet the 400, and we'll then definitely has to think that, okay, if I call here, how often I'm going to face the shove. I'm not sure if my plan was to go for the shove here, if they will then call here, but I might be giving up, because what is going to be 1800, he has 800, bit over 800 behind, so. But in a way, reasoning here for me to bet is that we don't block toes jack 10, queen 10, which might fold this bet, and we lane could easily have like pocket 10s, jacks, maybe queens, that I would imagine are going to fold. And the nice thing is that because we have the ace queen, we are basically going to block those ace slow playing, ace king. I mean, ace king would probably most of the time forward, but maybe not always, and I think king queen could be. We are blocking that also. So I think this is sort of better hand combo for like triple barreling compared to some queen jack, for example, because queen jack is going to block those queens and jacks type of hands more. So I personally don't mind this barrel, and luckily the lane gives up here. So it seems like this is going to be maybe around 1 hour video. I think I'm going to take like 35 minutes, so we get pretty close to 1/4 of this recording. So not really happening anything interesting. Well, jack 10 shooter is definitely. And we are defending if we don't face 3 bets. Well, we face 3 bets, so can't really play it. Well, bottom left defending obviously, and top left I just fold, which is fine. So we'll lane bet here. I think there is argument to go either way. But obviously, when we are blind versus blind, the A high itself has decent showdown value, so I often just call here, especially with these deeper stacks. No need to necessarily like raise and stack off, because I mean there is decent danger that if we raise and face 3 bet, that we might be drawing for basically just the flush draw. I went for the call here, we'll lane barrels, folding again. And we don't hit. So is there a point in bluffing? I don't think so, because we are still going to beat like Queen Jack, Jack 9, weaker flush draws, 9-7, etc. So we are basically beating all the semi-bluffs outside of some Ace Jack, Ace Queen. And if he has like King X, 10X, I don't think those are folding most of the time. So maybe we could get like some Ace Queen, Ace Jack to fold the barrels those, but and he actually had the Ace Queen. So top right, I call King Jack pretty standard, really dry flop. So my plan is most likely to check call. Because, I mean, only like natural sort of semi-bluffs would be like 5-4, 5-3. I mean, we could sometimes have, but yeah, we want to also have those King Jack X in the calling range most of the time, so probably going for the call. And bottom left, it seems we go for the 3-bet with the King Jack. I mean, top right is kind of awkward quarter, not that we most likely have the best hand, but we could. I mean, it's pretty rare that we have a 3x, but we could still sometimes have it. So let's see. Seems like I go for kind of in value bet, try to get him to follow some bigger stuff with the small sizing. It's kind of an interesting spot if we will then raise, so because this really small bet might induce something sometimes. Not sure what my plan was, but and then some old. Let's put the 2x speed. Well, now we get King Jack suited. Oh yeah, like here we can 3-bet also, but I usually just flat because I don't want to take the chance that we face the 4-bet and get screwed because we can't really stack off. But the flop is definitely favoring me, and we should, especially against more, if we think that the opponent is good and doesn't see bet this board that often, I think we should also don't bet some portion of time, but I probably go for check raise here. Also again, like, can have some 2 pairs, of course both of us can, but it's still somewhat better for my range overall. Or I don't know. I mean, maybe we have a bit more of like 4-6 and some 2-pair combos, but in against the button we are probably quite close, and of course he has all the over pairs. But yeah, seems like I went for the check raise. I mean, 2 overcards, second not flush draw. Most of the time we are going to have at least 1 overcard. If he has like some top pair or over pair. And well, pretty easy check, I would say, on the bottom right. I mean, I don't see too much good things about betting here. And he goes for half, but I decided to hero fold. That is kind of a tight fold, but at the same time I have had a bit of a history with this guy that he seems to be under bluffing in general, so it's the reasoning here I used to just check. And bottom left I decided to check for the kind of pot control, because I mean if we bet c-bet and we land raises, it gets into quite awkward situations. So, and by also strengthening checking range by taking that line. And yeah, my plan was to barrel the river decent amount of time, but I think ace is kind of a crappy one. So yeah, this hand for example might have taken aggressive line against the flop c-bet. I mean he has some showdown value, but he basically has equity against pretty much everything. Might have a lead into tough spots, like if it's a raise we have to call, we get the king on the turn, we'll then bet speak the tough spots. Overall. Well, king queen upper right. By the way, I don't have webcam because basically I think someone broke it. I don't know, maybe it fall on the ground or something at some point. The view is basically really foggy. Well, upper right limp pot we get trips. I usually go for check raise, but I don't hate occasionally leading either, because then we can lead some flush draws and some like 10 jack or that type of hand. And it seems bottom right I go again for the blocker like 3-bet in the position. And yeah, 350 upper right, so it will end call, it's going to be a bit over SPR1. One on the turn. And upper right, I usually just pretty much deep at small my fall range something. And bottom left, I limped and will lane 3x, I call. I mean, I don't really love these situations with crappy offsuit aces, because I mean, most of the time we don't really hit anything, so can sometimes lead into nasty spots. On this flop, so we have pretty easy fold, even against the small bets. And yeah, bottom right, going to value bet the ace. Yeah, we are pretty much 1 hour mark now on this current recording. And 5-3 upper right, I go again for light raise against the small blind limp. Will then call. Flop is again not horrendous in a way that in a way that Villain might not have quite. Well, it depends, but I think this guy was the type that he's limping a lot, so he can also have a lot of mediocre holdings that don't necessarily hit here. So my plan is to see bet small here, and when if the villain call and we get like ace or 4, I might be just shoving the turn. And try to put like some queen x and stuff like that in the tough spots. And bottom left, I just went for the check flop, check turn, I believe. I mean, we could definitely bet the flop if it went checked. But if he bet, we called and turn is pretty standard check, I think. Well, now he bets. I think when the board is 4 straight, and there is also the flush possibility, I think this might be, value range might be quite heavily toward straight queen x. So I think we should go pretty big tier, maybe 700-800 or something like that. I went for 540. I remember this hand anyway. Yeah, I didn't really. I think we should go bigger in this particular board. Kind of also exploitatively. I wouldn't try to bluff most of the time in this spot. But yeah, if it was like, let's say 5 of club, I think going for a bit smaller would be fine. But I think here we are going to lose value when the villain has the straight. And I mean, he might not be betting like some sort of 2 pair anyway. Board. So yeah, we are soon on the 35-minute mark. So I'm going to end the first part, probably going to make those 4 parts. Queen 9 upper right, I don't necessarily hate min raise folding sometimes, because it's quite close, like Queen 10 off I would be shoving. So, and it has some playability, so, and it's like also if the villains are rake, like the big blind is rake, he might think that if I'm in raise tier that I'm pretty rarely planning to raise fold, so it might look somewhat trappy also. But yeah, I think folding is definitely fine option. Well, do we get into, well, there is big blind sitting out and small blind having half PB behind, so probably nothing interesting happening here. Okay, so I think I will end this one here. So the idea is that I will make 4 of these from this, and probably also possibly making those where I just go through some kind of a mark hand, quattro image and this side. So if you have any feedback on this type of format, I mean, one of the good things is that we have, or I have time to talk about the spot a bit more if I want, or check it on the Hold'em resources, for example. We could maybe also do some post-flop stuff with like Flopzilla, for example, and check some equities in in some situations if we get into those type of spots. And yeah, any feedback is welcome. But thanks for watching and bye for now.